Hello, I'm Michael Gibbs. I'm the founder and CEO of GoCloud Careers, and I'm beyond excited to be able to share with you our new Generative AI Architect program developed in collaboration with David Linthicum. David is a subject matter expert in cloud computing and generative AI, and there is no better person suited to provide the guidance and mentorship for those of you who desire to become generative AI architects. What you're about to see is the recording of our most recent information session where David and I discuss the role of the AI architect and the program we've developed just for you. You'll also hear from us so we can answer your questions from the community. We hope you enjoyed this video and make sure to visit the link in the description to learn more and enroll today in this amazing new program. We look forward to working with you towards your goals. Before you listen to anybody, you need to know the background of the audience because are they credible? Do they have the experience? So, tell you a little bit about me. You heard a little bit about David over there. I've now been an IT architect now for over 25 years. Network architect, cloud architect, business architect, enterprise architect. I've loved every last minute of these. I was a lead architect for the entire healthcare vertical over at Cisco. I was a principal 2 architect over at Comcast, responsible for designing their backbone. I was a principal architect at Riverstone Networks. I was a lead architect over at MCI WorldCom, which is now Verizon. So I'm doing this architect thing for a couple of decades now. And like David, I've been involved in teaching for a very long period of time. I've spent about 2 decades helping people get their first tech job, get promoted in tech, negotiate those large raises. And graduates of mine you can see at Apple, you can find them at Amazon, you can find them at Cisco, you can find them at Google, you can find them at IBM, you can find them at Microsoft, you can find them at Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, British Broadcasting Company, JP Morgan Chase Bank, and any organization that really matters. And I love it when people get hired. And as David mentioned, he's been working with AI. I don't know if he mentioned this for over 30 years. So my first AI experience was a black box trading system around 2001. David's been working on these systems since the 90s. So David is a real expert here in both enterprise architecture, cloud architecture, and AI. And of course, he's been teaching for a couple of decades as well. So, we're the creators of this course. To put it into context, David created all of the generative AI content because he's an expert on it, and that's his background. My expertise is getting people hired, teaching them the business acumen, the leadership skills, the sales skills, the executive presence, the interview skills, the negotiation skills, and getting through that hiring. So together we work to create this content. So we're going to talk about today, what is an artificial intelligence architect? Then we're going to talk about what does an artificial intelligence architect actually do? Then we'll talk about why artificial intelligence is probably the most strategic and best job for 2024 and beyond. Then we'll talk about what are those key skills to become an AI architect, and it's not what most people think they are, and David and I will talk about that. Then we'll talk about how we at GoCloud Careers, David and I, build the absolute best generative AI architects, and then we'll answer your questions for 60 to 90 minutes, and we want to do anything we can to help you with your career. Whether you train with us, whether you want to go to business school and learn some of these skills, I just want you to have an excellent career, and David and I are very passionate about getting you hired and helping you build a career. So what is an artificial intelligence architect? And this is really important because most people don't actually understand the architectural role. We are a hybrid role where we are 50+% executive and about 50% technology professional. Now, that's a very rare combination, which is good news, because when there's a huge demand and a lack of supply, prices are high, which means we typically get great salaries. And the AI architect right now is one of the most strategic careers, along with the cloud architect and the enterprise architect. And with generative AI being probably the coolest, most disruptive technology, meaning a technology that changes the way we live, work, and play, generative AI architecture is at the heart of most of the digital transformation we're going to be working with for now. So why? What's the big driver with AI? In our world, our modern world, technology is the ultimate competitive advantage. And yet, most organizations spend a lot of money on technology and they yield very little benefit from them. In fact, Upwards of 70% of all technology projects fail. I mean, the tech works, that's no big deal. But the tech doesn't do anything for the business. It doesn't drive any transformation. And organizations are tired of spending billions of dollars to get nothing. And that's why we have these architects. We architects are responsible for designing a technology blueprint or a technology strategy to help that organization optimize its people and its processes to earn more and have a better business. And we're there to create that connection between the C-suite and the technology teams. So what do we do as architects? Well, we really work with the executive team to find the vision of their business. And then we work with the key stakeholders to learn how the organization operates. How does sales occur? How is the product designed? How is the customer service? How does technology get done? How does whatever the product is get created? Specifically, we need to understand the business processes, because that's how the business operates. And then we need to help that business re-optimize those business processes based upon what technology can actually do. So once we understand the organization's goals, their vision, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, then we can start evaluating their current technology. What technology do they have? Is it going to get them to their future goals? If not, what's the gaps between what they have now and what they need in the future? And then we need to re-architect that technology after re-architecting the business processes based upon the business goal. Now, when we finally understand what the technology we need is, we architects don't design anything by ourselves, and you can ask David about that as well. We're not a one-man or a one-woman wrecking crew where we're going to go do all this design. We architects then need to create an architecture team. And we will have to lead that team of technology professionals to design that actual architecture. So if it's an AI architecture, we're going to need network architects because the network needs to work. We're going to need security architects because we need the systems to be secure. We're going to need cloud architects, either in a private cloud or a public cloud, because we're going to need to make sure we've got the compute and the storage up and running. We're going to need IAM architects for the identity and access management. We're going to need data scientists, and we're going to need some engineers because they're extra techie and they focus on tech. So we're going to have to design that team that's going to create the designs with us. And then we will help create the strategy with that team. We will go back to our clients and we will talk to the key stakeholders. We will get their buy-in. We will get their input in order to make this happen. And then ultimately we will sell the architecture and we'll go off to a new client. A team of engineers will come and build this, and we'll do it again and again and again. It's the greatest job ever. We don't have to touch the technology, and we paid a lot of money to do it. So why right now is AI such an exciting time? Look, AI is not new. I mean, David's been working on AI systems for 30 plus years, and I've been working on them for 20 plus years. But what changed? Well, we've had some massive advancements in data science, generative AI, distributed AI, cloud computing, and networking that gives us the ability to do things better, in some cases faster, and even cheaper. And we've had exponential growth in the performance of compute, specifically the GPU, the CPU, the TPU, the fully programmable ASIC, and the full ASIC, which enables us to do much more, which therefore enables AI to do much more than it ever could before. Now, how big is this market? How big is this opportunity? Well, right now, a recent report in Bloomberg showed that the AI market is going to be $1.3 trillion by 2032, with a compound annual growth rate, or a growth rate of 42% per year. So let's put this all in perspective. That's about 3 times the entire cloud computing market right now. And you know how many people are employed in cloud computing at companies like Amazon and Microsoft and Google and Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, every bank, every retailer, and every organization. So 3 times bigger in a couple of years. Pretty impressive. So why is this so exciting? Because now we've got all these technologies. And if we can align these technologies correctly to an organization's needs, we can help drive some serious business benefits, and companies are willing to pay for it. So great time for us right now. Now, I'm going to tell you that the majority of technology projects are disasters. I mean, absolute disasters. CIO magazine talked about over 50% of cloud migrations being disasters, meaning they work, the tech works, but no business benefit. And I don't know about you guys. Would you guys like to spend billions of dollars and get nothing for it? I wouldn't. So McKinsey, so CIO magazine said 54%. McKinsey has showed basically 70% of all cloud architectures are disasters. So we're talking about a lot of people spending a lot of money and getting nothing for it. And that's where the architects come into the rescue. And that's why the architects must focus on these business skills, these leadership skills, these sales skills, these stakeholder management skills, because we are the key strategists to take that organization's needs, marry the technology to it, and bring everything up. So that's why it's a super strategic position. And businesses are looking for what they call a force multiplier. How do we supercharge our employees and make them better so we can run harder and beat our competition? And that's going to be AI. So the businesses that find value in AI, they're going to dominate and they're going to crush their competition. And businesses that don't know how to properly leverage AI, not that they're not investing in it, but they don't know how to use it right, are ultimately going to find themselves by the wayside, kind of like the blockbuster videos of the world that no longer exist because this disruptive technology like the internet and streaming changed the way their businesses work. So one other thing that's so exciting about AI architecture careers, we can't be replaced by AI. Look, there's in the software development world, some software developers, the bottom 30% or so, can be replaced by AI because AI can code. AI can write a Terraform script. AI can write a Python script. AI can write a Bash shell script or a Windows PowerShell script. But you know what AI can't do? It can't meet with that client to understand that client's vision. It can't manage a team. It can't communicate with stakeholders. It can't manage vendors. It can't sell. And the more of these opportunities that are there, the more technologies like AI, the more jobs for us architects to create a strategy to help those businesses be more important. And we don't code and we don't configure in our job anyway. So we are immune to the AI job losses that engineers face, and it creates new opportunities for us. So let's talk about these key AI architect skills. AI architect skills are going to be a combination of business skills, system design skills, and AI technology expertise. It's going to be 50 to 80% business. I'm going to tell you that right now. And 20 to 50% technology. So this is not a career where you're an engineer. This is a very different career. So because it's business skills, system design skills, and AI technology expertise, you need to learn a very different set of skills than if you were to learn engineering. And none of these skills are covered in certifications. Now, we teach all of those skills because without it, you're not going to be an effective architect. So what are these actual skills? You have to remember that the AI architect is a strategy consultant doing strategic consulting on AI. This is not a hands-on role. We don't build the technology. We don't touch the technology other than writing Word documents, PowerPoint documents, Excel spreadsheets, that sort of thing. So here's the skills. CXO relevancy. And what does that mean? It means when you communicate to the executive team, you need to understand what the CEO cares about, what the CIO cares about, what the CFO cares about from the CTO, and you need to be able to communicate to them addressing the issues that they care about. Because remember, the engineers, the techies, they don't buy our product. It's the C-suite that actually does. Now, you need to have business acumen. What is business acumen? We'll strip away the name. Business knowledge. The whole point of having an architect is you want someone that can actually redesign the organization's business processes and redesign the organization's business. Now, how do you design a business or a business improvement process if you don't understand business? You don't. And that's why 70% of technology projects failed, because they didn't have a good architecture team. Now, the next thing is leadership skills. You know, there's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. Architecture is a team sport. You can ask David about it later. You can ask me about it. It takes an entire village to create a great system. And we have to lead that village, so leadership skills. Now, stakeholder management skills. So let me explain this. When you walk into a global enterprise, there might be 50 business units, and there may be division heads in each of these 50 business units, and they all have certain things that they care about. And what you do in one side of the business can negatively impact another side of the business. So we're going to go in there as master negotiators, expert schmoozers. We're going to bring people together and get them to agree on things and support the architecture. Because if the stakeholders don't buy into the project and they don't get their teams to buy into the project, the architecture fails. And that's why we have so many failures. So lots of negotiation, lots of stakeholder management. Now, let's talk about sales skills. Let's face it, for the majority of these architect roles, we're pre-sales, at least 50%, which means we're going to earn more based upon the more we sell. But even if we are not paid a sales commission and we get a corporate bonus instead, we still have to sell, because we can have the most beautiful architecture, the most beautiful design that could truly help that client. But if we can't sell it, it's PowerPoint ware and it goes absolutely nowhere. So sales skills are going to be critical. Now, the next thing we're talking that are critical skills is communication skills. Well, nobody's going to hand us a piece of paper that says, Mike, I need you to build this. We don't build anything. The communication skills will enable us to obtain the requirements from the client, be able to communicate with the various vendors, because I promise you, it's not going to be just a single vendor solution in 99% of the cases. We're going to have to communicate with key stakeholders. We're going to have to address the people that are working for us when they get stressed or unhappy. We're going to have to address their needs. And all that's going to take a lot of communication skills. I'd say communication skills are probably the most critical skill for the architect. Next, presentation skills. I like to say, as architects, we design, present, and sell a solution, and you're going to be giving presentations. I can guarantee you that David gives presentations every day in his world. I gave presentations every world. Presenting at conferences, presenting at key industry events, presenting to customers is just something that we do. So you're going to have strong presentation skills, and you're also going to need executive presence. If someone walks into your office and says, I can help you, you're not even going to take them seriously. But if that person has executive presence, they'll walk in the room, they'll command respect, they'll look the part, feel the part, and be taken seriously. So now let's talk about some of the other components. We must understand technology and its relationships between one another. We can have the best AI designs for our GPU and CPU compute and our large language models. But if we don't have the right data, if we don't have the right network performance, if we don't have the right storage, it all falls apart. All falls apart. So understand that. Now, vendor management. We're going to be negotiating with various vendors, negotiating against each other, with each other. And a lot of what we do is we have to build these teams. Now, I got to tell you, in some of the big architectures I work for, I could have 15 to 50 people working with me on a team. And let's face it, this person that only eats green M&Ms, you've got to motivate to work. This person's having problems with their wife. This person's having problems with their child. This person had a bad day. We've got to have a lot of emotional intelligence to raise everybody's energy in the room, bring out the best in others, and take it there. We will also need to negotiate. Life is a series of negotiations, and it is constant negotiation for what we need to do. So that's the business skills, and that's 50 to 80% of the job. Now we'll talk about the technical skills, because they're also important, but these are design skills, not building skills. You can't learn design by building. That's why nobody hires a construction worker to design a hotel, because it's a different set of skills. So we have to understand that AI architecture is not hands-on. We do not touch the technology. However, we do need a strong understanding of how the technology works. And for all the people out there that think you can get hands-on and build it and learn how the technology works, I promise you, you can't. How many of you have got behind your computer and you use your computer every day, but do you really understand how your computer works? I know David could explain it to you. Do you understand the CPU and how those cores interact with each core? Do you understand how those cores virtualize each other for hyper-threading purposes? Do you understand that level 1, level 2, level 3 cache? Do you understand how the number of PCIe lanes on that CPU affects the amount of GPU compute that you can send to the CPU? Do you truly understand how DRAM, for example, injects things into the memory? And the point is, that's why you need to learn design on how systems work. And you can't learn it by hands-on building. You just can't. And that's why people don't hire construction workers to be architects. Same thing in technology. So you will need a strong understanding of underlying technology, what it is, how it works, why to use it. And then you will need a very strong understanding of how to design technology that supports the business needs. This means performance, availability, security, scalability, etc. And you will also need a wide range of knowledge on AI systems and AI system tooling. And you'll also have to understand the key relationships between networking, compute, and storage. So now what are these AI architect skills? They're going to be artificial intelligence design skills, network design skills, and why networking? If the network doesn't work, nothing works. Now we need compute skills, right? Because it's going to have to run in a data center, and it's either going to run in a private cloud, like a Nutanix cloud, an OpenStack cloud, a VMware environment, or it's going to run in a hybrid cloud, private cloud plus public cloud, or most likely in most cases, it's going to be a hybrid multi-cloud, where we've got our private data center connected to multiple clouds, leveraging the best that each has to offer and having higher availability systems. That means you'll also need data center design skills, and of course we teach all these, security design skills, data design skills, and the ability to help orchestrate and design governance, compliance, and ethics systems. And of course, we teach every last one of these because you'll need them. Now, we talked about AI design skills, which is going to be the crux of the technical component here. What are they? It means strong knowledge of databases and training data. It means knowledge of inference engines, knowledge of the capability about how to do AI model building, not that we build it, but I mean the actual models themselves, AI model training, AI model testing, and of course, AI operations. So we'll talk about our training, then we'll have David speak for a few minutes, and then you can ask us questions. Our training is about building your AI architecture career, and we have 3 live classes per week to do it. 2 of those classes, David's going to expertly instruct on AI design systems. 1 class will be with the Go Cloud Careers community team, typically me. If it's not me, it's one of our 3 MBAs, our 2 PhD business school professors, or some of the other executives we have from tech companies that come in and actually teach you the business skills, leadership skills, executive skills you need for the role. Now, in between classes, you will have work to do, videos to watch, projects to do, presentations to do, and of course, you'll turn the majority of these into our team and we'll provide you feedback on it. Now, we have a global community via Slack in every country in the world. We've got working groups throughout the world, and our students support each other. And many of our graduates, and by graduates, I mean employed, because people stay on our program until they're hired. We're not a boot camp. We don't kick people out after 16 weeks. That's ridiculous. We let people stay in our platform until they are hired. You know, even our graduates that are now working at AWS and Amazon and Google and Cisco and Microsoft and IBM and Accenture and KPMG, et cetera, they all get together. They're still part of this community and they support each other all the time. Now you will have AI case studies. You will have AI architectural design projects. You'll have team projects just like you do in the real world. Now, in between these, as I mentioned, there'll be videos, there'll be projects. You'll turn them in and get feedback on them. There's even training on how to build your brand, because you're going to need people to come to you instead of you applying. We will teach you how to optimize your resume. We will prepare you for the interview. We'll even teach you how to negotiate a higher salary. So come build a career with us, build a career that you love, a career that's going to come with respect and a paycheck that will support all your goals. I'd love to bring David on for a couple of minutes, talk about the program, talk about what he's done, because I'm very, very thankful to be creating a program with it like this with David. David's exceptional.
Yeah, Mike, that was one of the best descriptions I think of generative AI I've heard. I'm glad the record was on. But you nailed it. Ultimately, this is really 75%, 80% about the business. Your ability to select the right use cases, problem domains, your ability to understand how this stuff is going to work, how everything interacts one to another, your ability to explain and teach, your ability to communicate to the team members as well as the stakeholders. It's a complete role in terms of how we're going to take this technology, in this case, generative AI technology, and apply it in a business circumstance where there's going to be the optimal amount of value that's delivered to the business, which you would think would be a fairly easy thing to do. But what we're seeing out there in the market, and we've been seeing this for the last 10 years, the majority of AI projects fail. They fail because they're using the wrong use cases. They don't have the right business problem they're solving. They're not applying technology in the correct way. They're not hiring the right people for the team in which they're building their stuff. They're not getting any architecture in place. And the main thing is that they're leading with the hype. They're leading with the technology. And I think that's the fundamental mistake that people are making out there in deploying this technology today. They're not doing the design and the planning ahead of time, which is what the architects do. So in other words, there has to be core leadership in how the engineers interact with the data scientists, how the data scientists and the engineers interact with the security team, how you have to deal with the ethical issues around leveraging AI, liability issues that come to work together, your ability to manage different partner organizations, your ability to manage different stakeholders. And it becomes a lot to do about things that are not necessarily related to technology. And you have to be extremely good at those things in order for this stuff to be successful. As I always tell my clients, the technology is the easiest part of all of this. In other words, once we figure out what problems we're looking to solve, I can configure the technology in terms of an optimal way to solve your particular issues, the right AI toolkits, data training assets, model improvement systems, generative AI tooling. All these sorts of things are really kind of fundamental once you figure out where the problem is. The hard part is getting into the core business issues and trying to figure out what the core motivation behind the business, your ability to look at the objective and how the business is going to leverage this technology. And in many instances, is going to be an innovative differentiator that's going to define the business, which is hugely high priority within the system. And your ability to understand the business in such a way that you're going to be able to solve the problem the first time around. So in other words, there's no trial and error. There's no, fake it till you make it, all these other things that go on out there in the marketplace. So when you get right down to it, it's a lot of planning. It's a lot of communicating. It's a lot of understanding different assets, the business. It's a lot of understanding the use case and the problem domain. It's understanding the variety of technologies that are out there and what roles they serve. It's understanding how the team categories, the roles that need to be there, the skill sets you need to surround yourself with, such as the AI engineers and the data scientists, people who actually do the work and configure the technology, understand who the players are out there, who understand who's a reliable player, and holistically, how we're going to take a business problem or business problems, push it through a design process where we're able to understand the business down to its functional primitive and the problems we're looking to solve, and your ability to map those models into something that's deployable as a configuration of technology and having the right skills to make that happen. Lots of steps in doing that, lots of skills that you need to understand. And the skills I found, and certainly the architects, and when I say are effective out there, are extremely eclectic. So in other words, we're not dealing with someone who's a drop dead, AI technologist can tell you about the different open source AI configurations and training data configurations and how generative AI is configured and how all that stuff works and plays well together. But someone who can understand how to solve business problems by leveraging this technology, and that's a completely different set of skill sets. Also, your ability to understand it and explain it to others, your ability to deal with teammates, explain to your engineers and your security team and your data team how you want this thing configured and what this thing needs to do ultimately to live up to the needs of the expectations of the business, what technologies they should look at, things like that, and really kind of driving everything from the, hey, we need something that's going to solve this particular problem to turn the business to technology is going to be a true force multiplier for the business into something we can deploy and operate that's going to lead to measurable business value that comes back. And you're involved with every step of the way, yeah, all steps in the place. Where if you're an engineer, you're involved in this aspect of it. You're deploying the tooling, you're getting up and running, you're configuring it. If you're an operations engineer, you're associated in the operations of the system. Security engineer, designing the security systems and doing moving into SecOps. All these things where people are playing discrete roles and functions within the architecture. Architects, and the reason they're so important is they bind all that stuff together. Their ability to work and play well with a variety of teams, understanding different ways of communicating. You're not going to communicate with the C-level folks the same way you communicate with the engineers. You're going to have context switch in how you deal with different people, with different attitudes and different ways in which you're doing it. So it's probably the most fun career I think people can have because it has a just number array of skills that people are leveraging. You're not doing the same thing every day, and you're dealing with a variety of skill sets that are fairly unique in the industry. There's not a lot of AI architects that are walking the earth right now. I found, and I just talked to a recruiter the other day, and he verified that he can't find, anybody to fill these positions. So if that's going to be the case, we need to build more architects to go out there and build these solutions. We're looking at lots of people who have the capabilities and the desire to make it happen. We're putting you in a program that's not just providing you with the basic information, but showing you how to do something, working you through the problems, getting you to a state where you're ready to go off and be employed by someone who you're going to be able to take their game to the next level. Also, at a time where the interest in this technology and also the viability of this technology and the ability for this technology to add a tremendous amount of value to business is there. And it's perfect time for folks to get into this line of work, your ability to either pivot an existing career or restart your career in this space, and your ability to understand all the things that are important about leveraging this stuff to make it, leveraging generative AI technology, design technology, architecture technology to make yourself successful, and nothing you don't need. I think that's core to this. We're not giving you skills that you're never going to use, such as hands-on development of AI tooling, things like that. That's something architects just don't do. If you're doing that, you're doing the wrong thing. You're not defining your role, or they haven't defined your role as it should be defined within your organization. So it's teaching you to have these strategic roles within these organizations that are looking to take their AI game to the next level. Your ability to deploy into this technology, ability to understand all aspects of the business, your ability to drive a team, your ability to understand the technology stack and how it works in concept, your ability to explain and teach folks in the organization, your ability to go off and get budgets, your ability to sell internally, your ability to sell externally, just a wide variety of things that you have to be good at. But I think it's probably the most fun job that's available right now. And by the way, it's the one that pays the most. So happy coincidence that is. Some of these roles are getting paid, many times more what the cloud architects are getting paid, just because of the the scarceness of the skills. Now, obviously, that's going to be a market change and things like that, but your ability to define yourself and redefine yourself as something that's going to be more valuable to the marketplace is going to be core to you making the maximum amount of income, but also bring the maximum amount of happiness to what you do on a day-to-day basis. And I'm really looking forward to transitioning lots of folks out there into this role, and your ability to have the skills and technology you need to go off and get a job, and also be successful with your first project and all the other subsequent projects moving forward in your career.
Thank you for that, David. You want to comment a little bit about some of the technology systems you put into this for about a minute or two, and then we'll get to questions, because it looks like
Yeah.
we've got a
Yeah, obviously we focus on generative AI, but we do talk about deep AI systems, your ability to look at AI tooling, your ability to look at how generative AI works in the background within the engines, your ability to pick different platforms and processors, when to use a GPU, when to use a CPU, when to use the TPU, your ability to even look at the cloud on-premises trade-offs, when to do what, when, and where, what kind of questions you need to ask, your ability to look at the existing data sets, your ability to look at existing data hygiene tooling. In other words, taking data that's probably not in the best state, putting into a state so it can be consumed in a generative AI engine. Your ability to look at model tuning technology. In other words, the ability to see and tune and enhance the models ongoing. So in other words, we're always improving the models moving forward. You notice when you use different versions of ChatGPT, it's going to have a different perspective and different training data and different optimization within those systems, your ability to do that. Also, your ability to look at some of the non-technical things like ethics, your ability to leverage tooling to spot biases within these systems, which can be hugely damaging to the reputation of the business if these things aren't managed. And also your ability to secure these systems. We're taking security to another dimension. You have to remember security is going to be different with generative AI. We're able to, at the prompts, poison the models if they're not protected. And so it's not just gathering information and getting in it data they shouldn't be authorized to see, but your ability to get into the knowledge model and program it or provide behaviors to it, they're going to be malicious unto itself and protect against that. Most people don't understand how that security works. There's no security tooling that's coming out. We're going to understand that. Your ability to understand the different AI sets and different technologies out there, how you compare one for the other, why we should use proprietary generative AI systems in some circumstances, open source in others. Performance management, operations management, the ability to have AI operations in such a way we're able to look at best practices and tooling to make that happen, AI observability, and your ability to deal with different data sets over time, and also recycling information back into the existing data sets so they could be put back in the model, Just a bunch of stuff that kind of comes into play that we need to be aware of. We don't need to understand how to use them in a manual way. We're not using them in a hands-on way, but understand how the technology exists, what it does, what value it has, and whether or not it should be a candidate for your particular projects, whether you should look at that technology and make it happen. This is not about picking one technology and trying to find a problem or build an application around it. This is about moving from the core business issues into the functional technology to make it happen. But your understanding of the different technology tool sets out there, how they work, why they exist, and functionally what they do, and your ability to put them on the radar screen within the team as to be a design candidate for something that's going to take your business to the next level is obviously a foundational step in making this happen. It's not going to help us out if we're able to define the problem and come up with a good conceptual design if we don't know how to map the appropriate technologies into the design and what the design candidate should be, the technology candidate should be. So we're going to look at looking at things from a conceptual problem, your ability to understand things in a macro way. In other words, logical construction of logical understanding of the existing AI model that we're proposing and the business problems we're looking to solve, and then the physical implementation of that, the physical design, how we're going to assign different technologies, different technology patterns to aspects of that logical model. And then finally, how we're going to assign different technology brands and components, specific technology to that physical model and figure out a deployment mechanism to make it happen. So this is not technology of the week. This is not whatever is the hype technology out there and trying to figure out what Google's doing versus Microsoft versus AWS. That's a component of this, but not the core component of this. This is understanding the types of technologies that are available, where they should be used, when and how, and when they shouldn't be used. And that's probably a more important aspect of this than anything else. It's not just throwing technology at a problem. It's looking at the right technology and the right configuration where we're getting to the goal where we're going to look at a optimized architecture that's going to bring the most value back to the business. You got to remember that's the core component to all of this. In other words, it's a multidimensional system where we're moving from a logical design to a physical design to a technology configuration, with the objective being that when we get to that final configuration and final deployment, we can prove through metrics that that is the ultimate configuration, which is the most optimized for that particular problem we're looking to solve, for that business case we're looking to solve, with a particular technology stack that's custom configured to optimize the architecture for the business problem you're looking to issue. So in other words, we're getting to a point where we can prove that the technology configuration that we came up with by going to a logical, physical, and technology configuration is the absolute one that's going to be optimized for the business, and we're able to prove through metrics that it is going to bring the most value back to the business. And that's what people are seeking right now. You got to remember that when we're looking at any kind of AI technology, that there's probably 5 factorial number of permutations of systems we can use. They're going to solve the problem. They're all going to function. In other words, we're all going to get to a working state, but there's only one state that we're going to be able to get to, which is the one that's going to be the most optimized for the particular business problem we're looking to solve. And that's what we're trying to get to. So this is not about, just making something work. That's not what architects do. This is about putting together a technology configuration that's provable to be the most optimized for the business. This is about understanding the technology, but not having the technology lead you around by the nose and how you build and deploy these things. This is about looking at things from a very high level perspective, and as it drills down to the functional primitives and the lower level technology and all points in between.
Thank you for that, David. I think we should start answering some questions.
That'd be nice.
Oh yeah, Dave, you always tear the lid off the generative AI information, and it's always a treat just to listen to what you have to say, where you've been, and how you've applied it over the course of your career. So I think while we have one particular hands up, we're going to go with Valerie first, and then we're going to go with our list of questions. So Valerie, if you could, please share your question with David and Mike.
Hey, David, thank you very much for that presentation, and thank you, Mike. David, as an industry expert, a subject matter expert, would you just introduce to us the industries that are the early adopters of this AI technology into their platform, and how are they being AI ready and AI secure? If you can expand on that, that would be very helpful. And thank you for bringing, I know many people, some of them do not know that you have a lot of LinkedIn learning courses, and the differentiator is how you break it down and simplify it for people to be able to understand and grasp the concept. So I really appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the kind words. I think that everybody has some sort of a strategy that's moving toward generative AI these days. Whether they're doing something or not is another question. Some people have prototype projects to things that are going into production. If we're looking at the industries that are early adopters of this technology, it's definitely going to be the financial services industry right now. The banks, they're able to get the most value back from this technology. They're able to invest in the risk of the technology. They're moving forward and prototyping various systems, very aggressively moving in this space. That would be a key one. Next would be retail and the recommendation engine, your ability to optimize the retail chain, your ability to build AI systems that are fundamentally able to optimize things like delivery routes, logistics optimizations, things like that, supply chain optimization are really a huge value of this technology, and people are building these systems right now. Close second would be healthcare. Not that they probably have the most need, but normally have the least amount of money to spend in this space. But they're certainly investing in this area, getting into diagnostics, your ability to deal with better clinical systems. Mike can tell you more about that, having been in the space. And then the other industries such as manufacturing, your ability to look at oil exploration and production, all these sorts of things are getting into generative AI. Well, no one out there is being left behind. Everybody has, if you look in the organization, some VP of AI or the CIO has some AI strategy leader that's looking at building the prototypes and the cases. They're the ones who the architects may work with. Typically, a lot of those projects are being launched right now. Most of them are very prototype-like. There's some production that are going on, but it's, I think in this stuff, it's baby steps. It feels very much like cloud back in 2009, where ultimately we hit the stride in 2010 and 2011. And I think we're going to see that. We're going to see a ramp up this year in 2024. In 2025, we're seeing an absolute explosion in the number of systems and productions that are going out there. They're going to need architects to build these things. And then in 2026, we're going to see another year of explosion. And it's probably going to be a 5-year growth spurt until things level out and things become a little bit more sane out there around the hype-driven world of today. Very much like cloud computing, it's going to follow the same kind of adoption path, but it's probably going to be compressed about 60%. In other words, we're going to go do everything in about 60% of the time.
Thank you, David. And I have a question for Mike. Mike, I am an enterprise architect in the program, and you know that's what I wanted to be since when I enrolled in the program. My question to you is, how do I leverage this program to be able to bring out the best in my path that I've already started, developing while enrolled in the program?
Great question. So, to me, a good cloud architect and a good enterprise architect are really about designing systems to optimize business performance. And the job is fairly similar. Now, to me, cloud architectures mean AI architectures now. And here's the reason why. If we're going to pay the premium to actually use the public cloud versus using our data center, a lot of what we're looking for is agility. And a lot of what we're looking for is that this tech is actually there, because we may not actually be able to buy the tech. The GPUs are getting pretty hard to get right now. So a lot of that will actually go cloud. So if you are a cloud architect or an enterprise architect, what are your best tools to optimize business performance right now? Business process re-engineering and AI. I think AI is going to be honestly the ultimate force multiplier. I think it's about as disruptive as it was going from snail mail to email. And I remember how long things used to take to do a design. And once we could send emails around the world, it changed things. And as soon as emails enabled screen sharing and then unified communications, the world became real small. So to me, if I was you, Valerie, and I know you and you've got beyond normal education with doctoral work and postdoctoral work, no matter what, you're going to be good because you've got a great background. But if you had more AI, I actually think AI is going to be the ultimate of the ultimate tools for the AI architect or the cloud or the enterprise architect to use.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Lonzo.
Welcome.
My
Great
pleasure.
question there, Valerie.
Okay, gentlemen, our next question is going to be from Mujib. The question is, how does generative AI handle high availability, load balancing, scaling, security, like we use in DevOps? I guess all of this is handled if it's managed via a AWS service or maybe a cloud service provider tool.
Okay, and David and I will both give you an answer because we're going to come at it from different perspectives. None of this can be managed by AWS. None of it. This is managed by your architecture. Your availability is related to having no single points of failure. And that means anything from your wide area connections from your data center to your cloud provider. That means redundant power, redundant cooling in both your data center and the cloud provider. It means redundant servers. It means redundant storage. It means testing software or things before it's placed on the network. It means change management and change control. Like architecture and DevOps are like a cat and an airplane. They're different. They're both valuable. They're both important, but totally unrelated. So, you know, a lot of the availability is going to come from that. It's going to come from the security of the systems, the integrity of the systems, the resilience of the systems. But that's high availability in general. And we can never allow a cloud provider to manage our availability for us. We have to manage it ourselves. David, let me go over you with the rest of us.
I like working with you, Mike, because I can always answer these questions with what he said as my answer, but I can't state that enough. Redundancy, availability, scalability, all this stuff is a responsibility of the architecture. It's not the responsibility of whatever source service you're using. So the idea that we're going to throw this into a cloud and suddenly it's going to have scaling magic and resiliency magic and all and security magic that's part of whatever stack that's coming along with it is just completely false. It's a false understanding, and I think in many cases, I think that we're exposing vulnerabilities in systems and things like that by assuming these things are correct. This comes down to your design. You're dealing with variability. You're dealing with redundancy across multiple platforms. You're dealing with scalability in a very heterogeneous way, and you're leveraging multiple platforms as the ability to get that. And it comes down to you, the architect. You're responsible. Something isn't resilient and something doesn't scale. I don't go after the AWS rep. I go after the architect. They're the ones who have to explain themselves.
Alonzo, you're muted.
Sorry about that, gentlemen. Love it.
All right.
I love these poignant questions. I mean, it really fleshes out the understanding for everyone. So our next question, gentlemen, is going to be from Purnell. His question is, are the AI architects responsible for creating new ideas for use cases with AI technology, especially since most organizations are not currently able to see or understand the best use of Gen AI for their particular needs?
That's a great question. I'll take that first, Mike, and you can
Okay.
follow up. They don't necessarily come up with the business problems. They work with the business leaders to collaborate on the problems that are there, things they can solve with AI. But certainly, it is a cooperative relationship where people are understanding the capabilities and potential of the technology in the business discussions, and we're doing that now. In other words, people see this amazing capability out of some of the generative AI systems there. You know, certainly ChatGPT, everybody's using that for multiple different writing images and thank you notes and reports and half the capstones I get at LSU are created using generative AI, which is not a good idea. So we're looking at the potential of the technology, and I think it is kind of a AI coach, so to speak, that architects need to do in working with the stakeholders and the business leaders and understanding what the potential is. But as far as them creating the use cases singly, in other words, as their only responsibility, that shouldn't be the case. They should work with the business leaders to coordinate business use cases that everybody agrees upon. They're able to provide some guidance and some coaching as to what AI can do and also what it can't do. That's important as well. And your ability to bring these solutions to bear. So they play a collaborative role, not necessarily the role of picking the problems.
How about anything else you want to add, Mike?
Yeah, no, I think David answered it incredibly well. The key is, you know, the business is going to come to you, but that doesn't mean there's not opportunities for us to provide guidance. So for example, I spent many years as an enterprise architect working in healthcare. Now, in my youth, I was a nurse, and then I learned how to practice medicine. So when a company came to us and they said, we've got some business problems, I was able to say, yes. Do your nurses experience this? And they're like, yeah. Do your nurses have this problem? And they said, yeah. So I was able to say, well, we've got a solution for that too. And I can tell you as a clinician myself, it's there. But I completely agree with everything David said, exactly as he said it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Gentlemen, the next question is from Peterson. Does the Generative AI Architect Development Program qualify me to apply for positions related to generative AI in customer centers and customer experience?
I know Peterson, so I'm going to begin with this one. So Peterson, you are an expert in unified communications, contact centers, voice, video, all that kind of thing, and you've got a strong background in networking. Generative AI is going to be a different skill. Now, if you can take that contact center, and I want David's perspective as well, and all that unified communications that you're already familiar with, and if you can take that computer telephony integration that you're also familiar with, and all those systems systems integration that you're used to doing in the voice and video space, I think AI is going to add a lot of opportunities to integrate into the contact center. But that's not really, my main role here. But with your background and that skill set, I think you could make the jump. But I don't think the average person could make that jump. Let me turn it over to David.
No, I think it's great advice. I mean, if you have a particular skill sets and a problem to manage, which it sounds like you do, that's going to make you more helpful, useful in that particular problem domain if you get the architecture skills as well, whether it's cloud computing architecture, generative AI architecture, all these sorts of things. Your ability to understand what that specific technology does, and your ability to understand telephony, contact management, communication management, all these sorts of things are going to get you further down the way in being a more useful AI architect in that space. You got to remember, as an AI architect or any kind of an architect, we will get certain domain experience as we work within that domain. I built certain, things in the financial services industry where I understand different vertical aspects of financial services, compliance, things like that, and certainly healthcare, dealing with HIPAA compliance and coding standards and all these sorts of things. That just makes you more valuable. But you got to have both. You got to have some knowledge of the verticalized understanding of a particular space that you're in, as well as the technology you bring to bear in solving the problems, in this case, AI. So it makes you very much stronger in those domains. And as you become an architect out there, you'll learn different spaces and different businesses. That's the great thing about it. I've worked in healthcare, I've worked in finance, I've worked in manufacturing, worked in retail. I worked in government organizations, in the defense organizations, things like that. And I have understanding about what they do. And you have to have some domain understanding that you learn when you get into those spaces. And obviously, if I came there with that pre-existing knowledge, I'd be a bit more valuable in this space. But ultimately, they hire you for the architectural capability, your ability to understand all kinds of business problems, and your ability to map the appropriate solution into those business problems. And your ability to understand how these domains work on the fly is just going to make you more valuable.
Awesome, gentlemen. Igor, we're going to switch tracks and answer your question before we get back to our threads. Please share it.
Hello. Really great presentation. And I have a question. How that generative AI architecture is similar or different than software architecture?
David, I'll send that to you.
Yeah, software architecture is doing something in the narrow. So in other words, we're dealing with a particular problem and we're building an application, a coding system, which is going to solve a very specific problem. In other words, we're building an application instance to solve something that's fairly narrow, fairly specific. Architecture is the problem in the wide. So in other words, architecture really kind of contains many applications and many data sets. And so it doesn't make sense for the architect to understand what a specific application does in detail, but understand basically how the collection of applications exists and how it works within an architectural domain. So the best way to explain that is, it's almost like you're working on a car, and just understanding how the carburetor works or even the fuel injector works versus understanding the complete car. You have to have a holistic understanding of how these things kind of work and play well together and how they work and run together. So it's going to be very different in the skill sets and the level of detail and the macro level understanding to bring that to bear. Also, you can be an application architect and not necessarily have the communication skills and the executive presence and the decision-making skills and the team leadership skills that you need to be an architect. It's good to have those skills, but you're looking at something in the narrow. So your ability to have an engineering skill and deal with that specific technology is going to define your success, where an architect is going to has to have an understanding of many, many, many things in a heterogeneous environment to see how these things kind of work and play well together. So it's macro level versus micro level. Application architecture is micro level. Enterprise architect or AI architecture is macro level. Any architecture is macro level.
And you know, what David said there is so valuable if you really listen to it. We can't be focused on any one thing. It's the entirety of everything. That's why we need to build the team. That's why we need to lead the team. And that's why nobody in a real architecture role would ever let us code or configure or touch the technology. Because once we do that, we are at that micro level and we can no longer see the big picture. So I just wanted to highlight that because that's where people, they get it wrong. They think they're going to have an engineering background. They're going to get a code. They're going to code. They're going to code. And they think of it's going to how to design these systems. The code may be 2% of the entire system. And knowing 2% isn't going to get you more than 2%. You need the whole 100%.
Great answers, gentlemen.
And I
Next,
have also one boring question, what you probably heard multiple times. So, what credibility do you recommend for that AI architecture specific? Some certificates, formal education? If formal education, what kind of formal education? What do you recommend to be?
Mike and I probably have some good, strong perspectives on this. Certifications won't get you far in this stuff. So in other words, if you have a certification on how the generative AI systems or the Llama LLM works, you know, that's all well and good, but it doesn't really get you to an architectural perspective. You have very strong domain expertise in how a particular specific technology works, but how all the technology works, which ones should be considered, which ones are good candidates, which patterns do you bring to bear. Those things are way more important in an architecture. So the certifications, I understand why people take those. They don't get you down the road to being an architect because they get you focused on too much on a specific technology vertical, the specific, basically the micro versus macro you just mentioned. So in many instances, I think they can be a distraction. You're putting time, money, and effort into learning a particular product that's going to change in the next year, versus understanding something at a macro level, which is going to have very similar patterns over the next 10, 20 years.
Now, you know, Igor, the content creation. If I create a LinkedIn post, I get people that want to hire me. David writes a magazine, writes an article. He posts something out there. The world comes to you, right, David? They look for you.
Yeah. They want to know what I know.
Right. But they're not coming to you because of a certification. They're coming to you for the brand that you've built, those 17 books that you've written, all those LinkedIn articles and magazine articles, right?
Absolutely right. And you won't see a mention of any technology in my books.
no.
Because that's not that's something that it doesn't age very well, and it's something that's bound to a specific technology that a company is deciding upon, and you don't limit your capability within that kind of a smaller domain.
Okay,
But with
wonderful.
that content creation, there will be enough to make people come to you, or there will be like, okay, someone is writing something, but they don't have that specific credential, so I will not read, because literally I don't believe that the many people read the entire post who a lot of people posting on LinkedIn or somewhere.
People that
I can
will
tell.
hire you and pay you will read.
Yes. And people will read, and you know, there's different levels. The people that hire read. The people that hire are looking for things. The average person doesn't read. But if you look at a manager's salary versus everybody else in tech, you're dealing with, you know, the top 5%. So most people don't, but we do. We managers are constantly looking for people that we can add to our team that can enhance our team's performance so we can move up. Now, when I go to LinkedIn, here's what I see. chat GPT written posts and roast and posts written by people that know absolutely nothing. The associate, which is a trainee, that's making a post that's getting people like it. But the people that actually are hiring don't like it. They don't actually look at it. So the people that, hire you and pay you do read. Dave, how many books do you read in a year?
Probably about 30 nonfiction books.
But how much content do you consume online from other people, like writing articles and writing opinion pieces about this thing or that thing? You're
Probably 100 articles a week, and some of them become ideas that become articles that I write myself, or some kind of a net new article of an aggregation of ideas. So I listen to as many people as I can to get as many different opinions as I can, because I think that's important, but come to my own conclusions. And that's why people pay me. If I had other people's opinions, then people wouldn't pay me to do that. I have no additional value. It's you have net new opinions, which are going to be more innovative in terms of the value you're able to provide, is why people hire you. And that's why people hire architects. They're hiring people for creative roles. In other words, they're creating something that didn't exist before, which is going to be a net new thing that's going to solve the problem. And that's something that's unique in the industry. It's not just coding something and building a database. That's all well and good. We need those skills to build and deploy this stuff. It's people who have an innovative creative thread within the personality. They're able to take things to the next level, and always considering, always questioning, always learning, continuously understanding. And by the way, never being afraid to be criticized. When someone criticizes me, I always consider what they have to say. I never take it as a threat. You never take it as something that's negative. Your ability to have a very open conversation, your ability to have a very direct conversation with people on your team, and your ability to have people who are able to descend and learn from that dissent.
Excellent.
All right, thank you very much.
You have any other questions, Igor, before we move on?
Not now. Thank you very much.
All right.
Igor, you know how to find us.
Cam, the question is generative AI cloud architect similar to a network or big data cloud architect where they specialize in specific technology? Or will Gen AI cloud architect be more cloud architect with a generative AI technology in their tool belt for designing solutions? I am currently enrolled in pursuing a general cloud architect career, and I'm trying to understand the role of the generative AI cloud architect a bit more.
Okay, so there's two ways you can take this. I'm going to have David address the generative AI architect as the specialist position, and I'm going to cover the generalist position, and I'll also have David cover the generalist position as well. So there are two ways you can take your architecture career. One way is you become a technology specialist. And a generative AI architect is a technology specialist. It will have incredible pay, especially because of the supply and demand curves we're at. The second way is you can become an architect like me that focuses more on the enterprise architecture side, which is more on the profitability, more on the business. And then what are your tools as a generic architect? It's your business acumen, it's your leadership, it's your sales skills, it's your industry knowledge. But whatever our tools are, the better our tools are, the better the systems we can design. You need a better set of tools to work on a Porsche than you do a Chevy, so to speak, or a Mercedes versus a Chevy. And you need a better set of tools because they have a higher performance level of component. They can do more, but it's more sensitive. So from a business perspective, you could just take it as an extra skill as a cloud architect and have that as another tool that will make you stand out and rise far above the average cloud architect. But there also is the opportunity to do it as a specialist position. Like me, let's be fair. I can do enterprise architecture all day long, and that's my preference. But I could also go in there as a network architect, and I've done so and designed some billion-dollar network architectures for a lot of internet service providers. There's more opportunity for me in the business side than there is on focusing just on the network. But now you're getting into AI, and I got to tell you, being a network architect back in 1996 was the most exciting job out there. It paid 2 to 3 times what today's cloud architects are getting paid because there was a huge demand to build the internet, and there was nobody that could actually do it. And I feel we're in that same position right now with AI. But let me turn this over to David because he's more on the AI side than I am.
Yeah, you need all different types of architects that bring together different solutions. You have to remember that about 30% of the problem domains that I evaluate, which are considered to be candidates for generative AI, I would recommend that we don't use generative AI because it's contraindicated for what you're looking to do. And so the enterprise architects are normally the people who call in the generative AI architects to look and evaluate a particular problem domain and see if there's an opportunity that can be addressed with AI. And certain times there's not, and certain times there is. And so you have to remember that it goes back to the enterprise architect that has domain over the larger meta architect that exists within the enterprise, the databases that are there, processes that are there, everything and anything that works within the firewalls and even outside the firewalls and how that enterprise runs. And then you have the particular instances where you need the technology, such as security, network, those sorts of things. Architecture comes along for the ride. In some cases, may work together with other architects. In other words, a generative AI architect is going to have a network architect working with them, a security architect working with them, a database architect working with him or her, and your ability to figure out which things are brought to bear, really kind of comes to this. So you're getting into a domain specific. In other words, you're getting into a narrow domain, but not a narrow specific technology in doing this stuff. So in other words, we're saying we're going to solve this particular problem using generative AI because we pick this in a collaborative way with the decision makers and the stakeholders to make it happen. Then it's the generative AI architect's role to take that through the life cycle, build and to configure, design, get the talent needed, and then see through the building, deployment, and operation of the system. So it's different horses for courses at the end of the day. And so in other words, we're bringing the architect to bear that we need to have meta control over particular types of domains, but we have multiple types of architects that exist within the enterprise. Enterprise architecture is obviously people who deal with the holistic talent, what's going on, and they've been around for a long time. I've had that role myself for many years, back with a big oil company. And then different architectural roles, which get into more narrowly focused deployment of technology, in this case, generative AI or AI technology. And so everybody needs everybody else. You're going to report to certain architects, and they're going to report to you at certain times, depending on what collaboration you need to do to bring to bear some problem that you're looking to solve.
Thanks, gentlemen. Next question is going to be from Hassan. How is AI product management different from AI architecture?
Okay, so AI product management is you work at an NVIDIA, you work at an AWS, you have your teams develop a specific product, like maybe a new model, and then you try and convince the world that this is the best product for everybody and every use case, and just go buy it, buy it, buy it. So it's basically a product creation. Now, AI architecture is about being a strategy consultant for the client, asking the client what their business goals are, what their business pain points are, and then developing a cohesive strategy that involves the people, the processes, and technology to optimize that business. So that's really the difference.
From Jeffrey. Hi, Mike. How is AI? Oh, nope, we already went there for that one as well. From Carl. Hi, David. This information is so exciting. Question, what is the earning potential of a generative AI architect?
Potential. I just saw an opening today that was a recruiter approached me on at $1 million a year, including a signing bonus. And yeah, they even offered me a bonus if I found them somebody, but I don't do that normally. I don't work with recruiters, but I'm seeing those jobs opening up. Obviously, you need some experience there, and they're not normally entry-level jobs for a lot of the architecture roles, but they start at $200,000 and go up. Some of the consulting firms out there are hiring people that they're willing to train at $150,000, and then once you're through with the training, they start you at $200,000, and they'll scale you up pretty quickly from there because they're going to pay market, because they don't want you going down the street and getting a job someplace else if you turn out to be a good AI architect. So it's crazy out there. It's very much like cloud computing was in 2010, where the demand is outpacing supply. Best I can tell, we probably have 10 open requisitions, 10 open racks for an AI architect role that's chasing one qualified candidate. Yep. And obviously that's going to drive the prices up. Eventually, the market will normalize. In other words, enough people will go through the training. But I think it's one of these things where we're always going to need generative AI architect. There's never going to be enough supply for the demand that's out there, and that's going to keep prices up, salaries up, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, so and there's one other thing I want to highlight there, Cam. Because there's nobody that can do the job, not only is it going to have that perfect supply and demand curve price, but companies are going to be actually less careful than they are with a more established architecture career, because they're going to be willing to take people that are 2/3 there or 60% there and then train the rest or work with them the rest because there's there. Now, I'm going to ask David, just because he's been an architect forever. It's not uncommon for a great cloud architect to earn $400,000, $500,000 a year as well, if they've got the right business acumen, leadership skills, sales skills, executive presence. Have you seen that also?
Oh, absolutely. I think even somebody I would rate as not awesome architects, just average architects, probably make $500,000 a year if they have 10 years experience into the game. So it's and it's normally the jobs are demanding, but they're fun. They're not burnout jobs. They're fun jobs where you're working with creative people and innovative people. If people have the chops to do it, you can make good money at it. That's one of the reasons lots of people are in it. I'm in it because I love it, and I think people should be in it because they love it as well. But it's nice to be in a job you love that you're getting paid to live up to the standard that you want to live, which is important.
And I love it too. I do architecture because I love it. I love solving problems. When I practiced internal medicine, practiced architecture, it's the same. But that's the key of people that are focused on certifications. They're not going to have these skills. And that's why they always end up on the bottom. But it's these leadership skills, these business acumen, this executive skills. That's why we teach them so heavily. And that's why we beg you, please learn these. Don't focus on being an engineer. It's somebody else's job.
Well, I hope everyone took this to heart on what's going on from these two powerhouses on the value of it. So Cam has another question, gentlemen. Given the actual realized business value of cloud computing being agility, compressed time to market, and innovation, how do you see the generative AI architect's impact to these benefits of cloud computing for businesses? Is it short-term or long-term?
I mean, we're building these architectures in many instances on cloud, so it comes along with the benefits. In other words, we do one of the and probably the cloud, and I mentioned this in my course, is probably the most convenient place to build a generative AI architect, but it may not be the cost-effective place to do it. So we have those sorts of trade-offs going on. But the great thing about the cloud is we can provision on demand, we can scale up as we need it, all those sorts of things. All those benefits come along with it. You remember there are two different domains. So cloud computing would be the infrastructure that supports a generative AI system, which comes along with those value attributes moving forward. And that's one of the reasons you would put it in the cloud versus putting it on premises. So you're not losing any of that. That's available to you, whether you're building generative AI systems or not. Most of that's going to occur in the cloud, at least in the short term. I think the way the market's showing out right now. But as we cover in the course, it's always going to be option as to where you want to run that stuff. It's a heterogeneous, ubiquitous world now. So there's reasons to run it on the edge, reasons to run it on premises, reasons to run it in the cloud, reasons to run it on micro clouds that we're starting to see arise today. Lots of different architectural options out there that have lots of different benefits and trade-offs, cost versus agility capabilities and expansion capabilities.
From Sabello, what strategy should we employ for AI design governance in countries where comprehensive national AI plans and key policies are not yet established?
You got to look, you got to consider what the compliance stuff is going to be. And we cover that in the course as well. In other words, compliance is going to be a major factor with AI. We have the United States government says working on executive orders and things like that. Some of them make sense, some of them may not, but it doesn't really matter. We're not there to argue the law. We're there to comply with the law. So we have to look at what the laws that are governing the particular areas where they're governing, and you have to figure out the countries you're doing business in and make sure you're compliant with the law and making sure you're keeping an eye on the legislation and how that stuff is working, because you may have to understand the risk in moving and building something that may end up violating some sort of a rule and regulation by the time it's deployed. So you have to measure that risk and look at and work with the stakeholders. And so everybody understands, what the issues are that we're moving forward with. So we don't get to a point where we're disappointed. So part of an architect's role is having a fundamental understanding of what the compliance regulations laws are and the state, federal, country governments that are governing the systems that you're building.
Wonderful. Wow. From Kevin, gentlemen, how can this course compare to those out there? Also, how can I convince the hiring manager that I'm the right person for the job, especially with zero IT experience?
I'll answer this, and we'll have David answer this. There's nothing out there like this in the entire world. Everything out there is at this micro level. Let me teach you how to be an engineer and let me bias you towards my technology. There's some free training from AWS and Google and Microsoft, and it's all engineering, which has nothing to do with anything that we do. We are the only people that teach actual architecture, meaning understand the executive's perspective, understanding, the business processes and how they work, understanding how to create your architecture teams, understanding how to design your architecture with a group of a team, understanding how to respond to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs, understanding how to give an architecture level presentation, speaking to the C-suite, CXO relevance. We're the only people. Plus, our program is a massive program. It's long form content. Everything out is like a quick little hit. Let me teach you the $30,000 technician skill inside of 3 days, and you're off to go do technician work. So that's why I came out of retirement to create this program. I've been retired from my architecture career. I loved it. And that's why AWS, Apple, Amazon, Cisco, IBM, Google, Accenture, Deloitte, Capgemini, et cetera, hires our people. But that's why I created it to be different, because we didn't want to create architects by teaching engineering and hope they got there. And they're certification based and we're career based. But David actually did the AI. So I'll have David answer this. And David's been dealing with training organizations for a couple of decades too.
Yeah, they all have different approaches. It is unique and probably the only one in the world, ultimately, because it's not only long forms. In other words, we're taking our time and bringing you through the coursework, but also providing one-on-one consultation where you get to deal with the instructor. That's not something that I do with the other organizations that I work with, which is fine. They have their different ways of doing it. And I think some people want to consume training that way. But the thing is, this is, you can tell by the topic, is hugely expansive. It's a lot of information you have to understand, lots of different talents, lots of different patterns of understanding, lots of different dimensions we have to do, and it gets you through all of that. So I take you through how to find a job, how to open up a LinkedIn LinkedIn rec and understand the rec to see, if it's something you should apply to or not, and your ability to understand where the market's going, your ability to understand where the technology is going. Those wouldn't be available in some of the other short form courses because they can't be. People for the particular platform wouldn't watch them if they're over an hour. So this one is soup to nuts. You get to talk to me, you get to talk to Mike, you get to talk to Alonzo, you get to talk to lots of people who are going to help you through it. So it's not just throwing information at you and hopefully you consume it. It's the ability to have an interactive conversation with you, work through problems, tell you what you're doing right, tell you what you're doing wrong, moving in the right direction, have a complete coaching kind of paradigm, which I think is important for this stuff, which is missing from a lot of the architectural things that are out there.
Wonderful.
And Kevin, speaking of that ability to speak to us, I need you to reflect on that conversation that you and I had. Please.
All right, gentlemen. The next question is going to be from Diana. I have a question and it has to do with ethics. I can understand the benefits of AI. However, what are the dangers it can bring? Is this the risk of getting generative AI out of control?
Yeah, we talk about that in the course. I think there's a whole module on ethics, and just because it's so important with AI. So you have to be defensive when you build and deploy these systems, including understand AI ethics and have AI ethics specialists. As an architect, you're normally not taking on that role, that understand how to deal with biases, test for biases, understand how the system should be trained in ways which it's not going to bring fairness issues to certain things, which has happened in the past. If they're not monitored, trained, they're going to have certain biases in them. So your ability to minimize, understand them, and remove them is going to be an important aspect of this. So ethics is hugely a big part of this because it's going to be a legal issue at some point in time. You're going to find that as an architect, as an AI architect, in many cases, you're providing expert testimony because a lot of this stuff is going to be tested in court. Now, we're not responsible for that. We're not lawyers. Nope. But the thing is, we're building systems that are going to have certain risk parameters. Your ability to minimize that risk is going to be your job as an architect. But a lot of them are going to get tested in court no matter what. And so your ability to have a comprehensive ethics program be able to explain it, and your ability to understand that you're doing the right things in building these systems and not hurting people is fundamental to this. And that's what we talk about in the course. And it's a large part of it. I think ethics is mentioned certainly more times in this sort of an architectural domain than it is anywhere else, just because of the potential harm that this technology can do, as we're aware of. And if you read the news and things like that, governments are dealing with it, politicians are dealing with it, things like that. And we have to deal with it as architects.
And if you're old enough to remember, come with me if you want to live. But that's the other side of it.
Love it. From Sabello, gentlemen, will the training include comparisons of hardware costs and skill requirements associated with implementing chosen AI technologies, frameworks, and tools based on the project needs
Yes,
and scalability?
of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we'll give you problems to solve and configurations so you can make the decisions yourself. It's one thing to say, something's about this much and this much, but it's understanding the value and doing your own worksheets and, trying to do the back of the napkin calculations to make sure we're using the most cost optimized solution. That's the domain of the architect, and we're not escaping that.
Next question from Anil. What is the Python software skill set expected for a generative AI architect role?
None.
Yeah.
I know David and I mentioned it. We are not engineers. We do not code. We do not configure. We do not implement. We design, we lead, we present. And that's honestly, I'm glad you asked that question, because this is why almost nobody can become an architect. Because so many people want to become an architect, and they learn Linux and they learn Terraform and they learn Python and they learn all these hands-on engineering skills. And they have absolutely nothing to do with what we do with regards to designing systems to improve business performance. So, I don't build anything in an architect career, and I haven't in 25 years. David, do you get out your code? Do you start sitting out there and coding and configuring anything?
No, I know how to code from way back when, but I also know not to do it, or else it's going to not be my job, and it's going to have a detrimental effect on my ability to make a decision.
From Marla, can you elaborate briefly on decentralized AI, its applications at the enterprise level, and how it compares or contrasts to generative AI?
Yeah, decentralized AI can be generative AI. You got to remember, generative AI is a type of machine learning, and we've been doing machine learning on the edge and within data centers for a long period of time. So, we talk about this in the course, your ability to have centralized AI where we're running on a central set of systems. And by the way, they don't have to be physically connected together. They can be dispersed into themselves, but they're centrally run. We're running them as a single entity. Versus running intelligent edge-based systems, do things like oil rig production management, things like that may exist on the edge-based systems, and we may have 10,000 of them under management that are centrally controlled. So that's part of the architect's role, is figuring out where this stuff is going to run. It makes sense in some cases to run these systems on the edge-based systems, so we're putting the intelligence closest to the data that's being gathered, and so there's some architectural advantages of doing that. And then having some sort of a centralized control. But in some instances, it makes sense to centralize these systems. So it has anything can be centralized and decentralized, including generative AI. How you make that decision is based on the use case you're trying to solve, the business problem you're trying to solve.
Next question is from Purnell. Is RAG a substitute for incomplete data architecture and hygiene? Also, is RAG something that we will be discussing in this course?
No, it's not a substitute. And yes, we'll be discussing it, but not in detail. I don't think it's that important to dealing with the data architecture. We're dealing with macro meta systems and trying to, bring other methodologies and other technologies to bear. Just kind of muddies up the water. Your ability to kind of understand how to get to a logical database design, which you can map into a physical design, is a fairly simplistic thing to do. I don't think there's a reason to muddy up the water with things like that.
Okay. And usually, Purnell, when we also in class, acronyms are kind of like the no-no that we always talk about. We want to make sure everyone is on the same page when it comes to what acronyms are. So retrieval augmented generation, Marla, specifically for you. Okay, Surin, could you please elaborate on how design patterns are utilized in generative AI projects? And which specific patterns are commonly employed for various components of the system? If used, will these be discussed, covered in the program?
Yeah, they are covered. So in other words, the design patterns that we look at is, in other words, in the use cases, what are the problem patterns that we're defining? What are the solution patterns we need to solve the issues, and what are the design patterns to come to a solution that's going to bring you from a problem pattern to a solution pattern? And there's 20 factorial of design patterns that we can leverage in the space. And so it is looking at the foundational aspect of that, some common patterns that people are leveraging, things like that. So it's discerning the patterns from the use case, your ability to define the patterns, but your ability to find solutions to those patterns, and your ability to have design patterns to bring you to the solution. Yeah, remember, once we have an as-is state, the existing problem pattern, we have the to-be state, the solution pattern, the ability to bridge those two is really what we're going for. And how you do that and how you design those systems is going to be completely situational on the problems you're looking to solve.
Yeah, and I want to highlight something David just said because it's pretty important. We can't just take architecture patterns and shove them into an environment. That's reverse engineering of someone else's business, and that's the engineering approach. Customer A did it. Let's use it for customer B, but customer A's business and customer B's business are different. So when you shove somebody else's architecture into your systems, you destroy some of the business benefits. So yes, as David mentioned, he's teaching those design patterns, but he's also more importantly going to teach you what to use, when to use it, and how to solve the customer challenges. And then that's the difference between an architect and an engineer, is thinking at that higher level, what problem are we trying to solve, not going to that design pattern or straight thinking about features or speeds and feeds of a technology.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, doing like integration technology patterns, like the book I wrote behind me, there are existing design patterns for integration that people have written down. And in many instances, people try to force fit them into different domains and end up using the wrong patterns for the wrong reasons. So you have to evaluate. Those are good for bases of understanding, but you can't use those as something that you have to use, which kind of funny to me that people would do that. You have to use something specific in terms of solving the problem you're looking to solve, or else you're not going to solve it in an optimized way. You're going to use somebody else's IP that's going to get you 50% down the road where you need to move.
Next question is from Satya. What are the basic different options in generative AI like ChatGPT, Meta, OpenAI, like my Q1 above, Llama 2 compares? How does that compare?
Okay,
Well,
I'd like to.
Hey, they
go ahead,
actually
Mike.
have their hand raised. We can bring them off mute.
Yeah. Satya, are you ready? Satya, we can take your question whenever you're ready. Okay, gentlemen, we'll just, okay, she's, they're here, I believe.
If not, I think there's two ways we want to answer this.
Yeah.
I want to answer it from the architect career perspective, and then I'll have David answer it. If you're thinking about this, and you're already trying to compare and contrast your features between different things, you're not thinking like an architect, and it's going to hurt you, it's going to hurt your career, and it's going to hurt your clients. Compare and contrast a Ferrari, or Mercedes, and a tractor trailer. Well, which one you use is going to be really based upon what your customers' needs are. So you can't start thinking about the technology. You have to think about what's the vision for the business. You have to think about how that business operates, how that business needs to operate. You have to think about the current technology, that current organization's needs. And then when you do design an architecture, it's not going to be the speeds or the feeds or the strengths and the weaknesses. It's going to be what solves your customers' problems best. And that's going to be an evaluation of all trade-offs. There's a reason organizations are going back to mainframe computers. There's a reason some organizations are leaving the cloud. There's a reason other organizations are going to the cloud. There's a reason that 70% of technology projects fail. And that's because people think about the technology first. Oh, the difference between this and this. There's no best cloud. There's no best tech ever. There's whatever's best for your client. So I kind of went ahead to put that in perspective from an architect perspective for you and for everybody else. Now, David, I'll have you give your perspective here as well.
This is another what he said thing. I was going to say you're comparing and contrasting LLMs. That's not what architects do. So that's an outcome of somebody else's architecture. So that's not going to get you any closer to the knowledge you need to know. That's just looking at instance of technology that exists today, which is neither here nor there as we build and architect things.
Next question From Igor, how much math do we need to learn, and do we need to learn linear algebra?
No. I'm still looking for an application for calculus I learned in college. As soon as I find out letting, I'm 62 years old. I haven't hit one yet. So, and I've been a computer science professor for 20 years.
Oh man.
Yeah, Igor, now will you calculate the return on investment in a business case? Yeah, but you're going to do that in Microsoft Excel, the probability, the expected value of an opportunity. But no, this algebra stuff, kind of scary. Calculus stuff, kind of scary. And that's not part of what we do. Never understood why computer science courses had so much math in them, honestly.
Neither did I.
Okay, gentlemen, from Edward. David, can we get a reading list from you based off of the books you've mentioned and recommend?
Yeah, I mean, just go out to Amazon.com and type my name. The Cloud Insider book, I think, would be one I recommend just because it's cheap. They don't charge you an arm and a leg for it. All my other books are $50, which I thought was kind of stretching it. For $20, you get an insider look into what this technology does and how to deploy it, inclusive of AI. And so, in other words, getting kind of the back, kind of get the insider's view on how this stuff is moving through. So I recommend that book. And there's other books out there in the marketplace. Thomas Earle's one. I recommend you follow him as an author. He's written about half a dozen books. They're really good on architecture patterns, architecture stuff, cloud architecture, AI architecture, digital transformation. There's some great authors out there.
Okay. Let's see the
Please
next
feel free.
question. Go ahead,
Please
Mike.
feel free to ask questions. We do want to really help.
Okay, I believe as of now, this is probably one of our final questions as of now from Sabello. In the realm of AI, how many public clouds offer their proprietary AI products, which could lead to vendor lock-in? While independent AI solutions are also available, is the current training focused on crafting non-proprietary AI architecture solutions specifically designed for multiple public clouds, including data centers?
Yeah, it's both. It's providing the right architectural solution, including technology solution, is going to meet the needs of the business. Sometimes that's going to be open source AI-based systems. Sometimes it's going to be AI systems that are bound to a particular cloud provider, which you would say is proprietary. Probably that's accurate. And we talk about trade-off as a trade-off of all this stuff, including open source stuff. So all this stuff comes with good points and bad points, different cost points, different risk points, and we evaluate the different points. It's looking at the benefits of moving to an open source system as well as the deficit of doing that. And the same thing with the stuff that's in the cloud system, which may be more convenient, easier to leverage. And it's looking at all of these factors and picking the right technology stack to make it happen. So you use everything out there and you bring everything to bear and consider everything. One of the things that architects can't do is be closed off with particular solutions. There may be a reason to leverage a proprietary solution if that solution in this particular case is the right solution for the particular problem you're looking to solve. Now, I understand there's going to be lock-in associated with that, but we understand that risk and we factor that into making that solution. That's what architects do. This is why it's hard. It's a hard problem to solve, and they make $1 million a year.
Exactly.
Vince. Okay, we're going to be ending soon, and we ask and encourage everyone to bring their questions in. As of now, Valerie, please step up. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Lonzo. Thank you for the opportunity again. And David, I have two other extra questions, which thankfully we have time for me to be able to post them. One is going to go to you and the other one is going to go to Mike. And I'm glad that you just mentioned your book, The Cloud Insider for Cloud Computing. Now, one of the things that we were talking about in our group as architects, because we are all passionate, I am passionate about architecture, and we wanted to know, because you once said that an architect is someone who knows a little bit about everything, part of the technology, the network, the data center, and different things within the cloud. Would you say that the AI architect sits on top of that, that not only do you have the prerequisite of understanding the cloud itself before you specialize into AI architect, or is it a prerequisite or not?
You obviously need to understand a bit about cloud computing if you're an AI architect, because that's where, some of the things lie. But if you're a cloud architect, you're dealing with very specialized things such as infrastructure, security, operations management, things like that. And aspects of that are related to AI. And certainly having an understanding what cloud computing is and the different cloud systems are, they're different in terms of the specialization. So, I've done cloud architecture and I've done AI architecture. A lot of the skills and the knowledge is transferable across both of those domains, but there is a different skill set that comes along with being one versus the other. And that's why we need both. And I think that working and playing well together and your ability to have different architects with different expertise are a recipe for success, because we're going to have lots of skilled people. They're able to do objective designs, enterprise architecture, security architecture, network architecture. We got to have people in these particular silos that are able to work and play well together with different skill sets, including AI architecture, to make all these things work. One of the things you'll do as an AI architect is work with cloud architects. In other words, your ability to define what the requirements are, and their ability to go off and pick the best cloud solution for that, and your ability to pick the best AI solutions, their ability to kind of work with you in terms of what's going to be the best bang for the buck for the particular business case that we're in. We have to consider FinOps is associated with this. This stuff's expensive. So all of these roles are different in terms of the skill sets that they bring, but they're very same in many instances, and they have to work and collaborate together. You can't exist as an architect in a silo. You're either going to get fired, or you're going to fail, or do both.
Okay, thank you. Now, my second question, which we talked about, is you have such a proven track record, and when we take your courses on LinkedIn, we get some visibility on your profile, or which you can share with your friends for them to be able to know how valuable or how useful the course was. To this program, is there anything like that will come along with it? Because if someone enrolls in the program and they complete the program and they're out there, is there a way that someone will be able to know that they have completed this AI training, which it's one in the world? I mean, there is none like it right now. There are cloud service providers often offering their own AI training, but it's specific only to their environment. So what do you say with respect to that?
Absolutely. Mike maybe answered the question as far as different certifications you can put on your LinkedIn page, but brag. If you complete the course, then you've done something that's amazing, and hopefully you'll be announcing a job that goes along with that. But your ability to get through it, and your ability to have this understanding, but your ability to be enthusiastic about it is probably the most important thing. So, someone putting a certification up is awesome, but their ability to define how enthusiastic and how they want to get into this career and how this career means so much to them, and how looking at the different opportunities in the market right now in terms of bringing themselves forward, and how they're excited about their new job, and how they're excited about their first week, and how they're excited about their first year and building and deploying these systems, and bragging about aspects of what this career path means to them and the satisfaction they feel from it. That's probably the most important thing to do right now. The certifications are fine. Brag about us or anything you want to discern on your social media. And I mean, by the way, I'll repost it. But ultimately, I want to hear how excited you are, how it's working for you, how you got a job, how you're happy with the job, how you're happy with the salary, how you're happy with the people you're working with, happy with the problems you're solving.
So, Valerie, I want to say something real fast.
Sure.
And David set me up with this, so it's very easy. He teed me up perfectly. We want you to share the job offer and not the certification. So, yay, I got the job. That's all that
matters.
That's all that matters. Now, I got a feeling, Valerie, is yours because you want to share what you've accomplished, or because of what the community or Go Cloud Careers is doing for people? What is?
I think it's actually both, because one of the ways that I got to take my first course from David was because someone, I think that was Anthony Gonzalez, had finished a course offered by David, and I saw it on his LinkedIn. I also did the same, and recently I took the FinOps one, and then shared it, and somebody else also took it, right?
Yeah.
And that's the way the word gets spreads across.
Right.
But
Right.
then I started looking at it from the recruiter perspective. If you look at the professional development side of it, you know that this is an architect who is continually learning, continually improving their skills. In fact, the course by Thomas L. was because David had recommended that course, and I took it and recommended it to Mark. And that's the way we all, I
Grassroots.
feel like I have learned tons and I grow. And
Yeah.
I've told my wife to be patient with me. I seem to be learning too much, but it's simply because I'm passionate about it and I love it and I want to
Well,
do it.
the
Do
thing
it
that
well.
we have to make sure to be careful about is that if whatever we do have for you guys to be able to put out there, we have to make sure that it's appropriate for the brand that you're trying to build.
Yes.
That's
So that it doesn't appear just like one more of 15 certifications that somebody's done, or
Exactly.
one more. Because then if your entire LinkedIn feed is, I've completed this training, 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 and you don't do any of those writing of articles or providing thoughts on someone else's article, or, you know, if you're not doing any of that and it's just all, I did this, I did this, I did this, that's where we have to make sure we find a balance.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have
And
something.
we will have some.
We just have to make sure it's the right something
Yeah.
to present the right way, and not just one more thing that somebody
Yes.
collected. So,
Yeah.
sorry, you guys know me. I don't talk much, but
No, that was
what I want to
critical.
talk. When I
Very
find something I
helpful.
want to talk about, I'll pop in. It's the beauty of being the man behind the curtain.
Okay.
Thanks for speaking on it, Chris.
We appreciate
And
you.
this came out from our group discussions with other architects who were thinking about taking the program and asking me in our team about my position. And I thought I should bring it here and share it with you guys. So
It's
thank
a
you.
good question, and we'll have plenty of opportunities for people to create something or do something or post something that will help them.
Okay, gentlemen, we're going to bring it home. I think we have 3 more questions left. The first one is from Raj. Is the Generative AI Architect program, will there be topics related to prompt engineering?
No, and let's be fair. I mean, David, obviously, prompt engineering is, how to use a prompt to do something. We're not engineers, we're architects. So we're not going to be thinking about how we can use it to do something. We're going to think about how we can design the whole global system to optimize our client's business performance. If you want to be an airplane pilot, I promise you, it doesn't help you go to law school. It just doesn't. In fact, every minute you spend learning someone's career other than your own is a minute your competition's getting better because they're learning their career and you're not. So for me, I'm passionate about mastering my own career, not someone else's. But, I'm a performance coach, but I'm sure there'll be some kind of concepts on prompt. So I'll hand it over to you, David.
No, we obviously talk about the concept, but as far as doing it and using it, things like that, that's either here or there around architecture. So let's turn it over to an engineer. And if they want to use prompt engineering as a method for building and deploying something better, AI code generation and Copilot, all that stuff is on the table as well. But as an architect, normally we don't deal with that level of detail for a good reason. And by the way, I don't think we'll be talking about prompt engineering in a year. It'll be something that's going to be baked in the development stuff. It's not as important as people think it is. Lots of concepts are being spread around. I know that because I've talked to 3 reporters that were doing stories on prompt engineering, which I can tell it's going to fizzle out pretty quickly in terms of what its value is. It has value, but it's not this strategic value that's going to take our technical game to the next level. It's a tactical value in building and developing things.
Gentleman from Sabello. David, with regard to environmental concerns, what are your thoughts on the energy consumption challenges associated with AI? And I'll share the other part of the question with you afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I participated in a documentary called Clouded 2, which, questions the fact that we seem to be building, cloud data centers without scale. And so obviously we need to pay attention to that. AI is going to be another set of conundrums we have to get associated with. If we start building the number of data centers that people are saying need to be built to support the need for AI, our power grid's going to run out of power, and we're not going to be able to support that infrastructure. Putting aside the whole carbon, footprint stuff for now, I just don't see. I did the back of the napkin scaling, and we're going to have a problem just scaling the thing up. So that gets into the fact, if we can't have an unlimited number of resources, including data center and power, to build these things, we got to do the architecture correctly. Right now, I see the most egregious misuse of resources out there, including processor power and storage systems, is bad architecture. What I tell people is that we can build these systems. They're going to have the capabilities and do so in a very green and sustainable way, and we don't have to give anything up. In fact, we increase the capabilities of these systems. So we just got to get smarter in building this stuff. And there's a whole green ops thing, and which is being around. But right now, architectural inefficiency is the primary reason that we're getting into trouble with this stuff. We've had bad architecture on top of bad architecture. We need to stop the insanity, start building these things more efficient, which is one of the reasons I did this course. So I'm teaching you how to build AI systems with a minimum amount of power, minimum amount of money, maximum amount of business benefit, which is why we exist.
Yeah, I remember the article you recently put out about them always assuming there's a tool for everything, for the discrepancies in the inefficiencies and how they built it. And it's just a big problem, to say the least.
Yeah. Stop the insanity.
Okay, gentlemen, this is going to be from Edward Mitchell. How can we learn how to optimize our LinkedIn, blogs, websites, and what will that be a part of the training as well?
Great question there, Edward. It is completely part of the training. There is a section written on personal branding, executive writing, LinkedIn profile, resume training, and even salary negotiation. Now, to be fair, Edward, we don't let you access it in the first couple of weeks, and here's why. When you put that Go Cloud Careers down and you follow our resume work and our LinkedIn resume work, people are going to come to you. But, having them come to you and going on an interview until you have the actual skills is not a recipe for success. So we basically have that open to you when you're midway through the program and you're getting to the point where you're actually able to start interviewing and be hired. Because graduation for us is normally when you're hired. But we'll come up with some kind of certificate for Valerie, because his point is right. We'll get some certificates in there, not just you got a job offer. I get it, and it's real, and we'll take that seriously. But that's really the key. It is there, and there's a lot of training in there. And I initially created the training because I have a little bit of experience in this. And then we brought Alonzo on, and Alonzo's been a marketing executive for 30 years, along with an MBA before he became a cloud architect. So Alonzo added a lot of that professional branding to it, and Alonzo's contribution to it is extraordinary. So lots of good training there.
Well, gentlemen, I think as of now, if no one else has any questions over the next 2-3 minutes, we have concluded all the questions we have. We thank you guys for all this wonderful education, this experience. Please share any more information, Chris and Mike and David as well.
Yeah, I'll share a few things and then I'll let Mike and David wrap it up. So just as a reminder, everybody, this goes live next Wednesday. The on-demand content will go live. First live class will be on Wednesday. Also, I forgot to mention, for those of you that may be familiar, your next Friday soft skills class will be from Dr. Johnson and Dr. Long at the University of Tennessee Martin, and they will be discussing time management. So what an appropriate topic to start off your Gen AI with a soft skills class about time management. But that will be for both the generative AI students, the cloud architect students, the enterprise students. Everybody gets access to that one. But this Gen AI starts next Wednesday, and you've got the 50% off pre-sale going on through Wednesday. So take advantage of that. The link is there in the chat box. We've been posting it throughout the session. That's also a link to the information page, not just the enrollment page, but it's got the enrollment options, and then underneath it, it's got all the information in there about what's included. It's got a short video from David about kind of an introduction to what's going to be covered in there. So take advantage of that. And you'll also find the classes you'll find the times for the classes on there as well. So the class schedule for this Generative AI Architect class will be Monday and Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern time. And Friday soft skills class at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And we specifically did it that way so that it doesn't impact the existing Cloud Architect class for those of you that are choosing to do both of them. So yes, 2 hours each on all of those sessions. So that's all I've got to share. I'll let Mike and David close it up for us.
Okay, now I'd like to thank you for coming today. I am beyond excited to have David work with us on this program. I have extreme respect for David. He's the consummate professional, and he's been in this architecture world even longer than me. And that actually says a lot, since there's very few architects with my level of experience. He brings a wealth of this kind of background on cloud and AI, and I'm excited to launch this program with us. You know, we've launched it up until the 30th. It's 50% off for those of you that desire to join us. I think this is one of the most exciting times to be an AI architect. I think the demand is huge. The supply is absolutely minimal. And I think now's the best time to get out there and be a properly trained architect during the boom, and maximize the next 3 to 5 years of this being the ultimate career, just like I did in networking. And then after that, it's still going to be a great job. But in those first couple of years here, there's a tremendous opportunity, a tremendous amount of money to come in, and it's going to be a lot easier to get your foot in the door when there's no one trained to do it. For those of you that are Cloud Architect students of ours, and I know a lot of you are, I'm going to see you in class. I can't wait to see your architecture presentations in about an hour. Got some good architecture presentations on Monday. I'm expecting some pretty exciting architecture presentations soon. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, David, for actually coming today. And we look forward to working with you. And do we build a group of people who took the course? Yeah, we've got a community, and there's a group, and you'll already be there, and it'll be a good experience for all of you. Take care, everyone. And I look forward to seeing so many of you in class. For all of you that registered, because I saw a lot of registrations or emails come in, please, you're going to receive an email that's going to welcome you. Please read that email. That email is going to have a lot of important things necessary for your career. I never want anybody to take our course and not get the maximum value out of it. So please read any communications that came to us on the same email address that you used to actually register for this program when it actually comes out there. Chris, I'll turn it over to you. I think you had one thing that you wanted to address, or no? David, would you like to say anything else?
No, when we talked about this, I asked Mike, let's build the best AI architecture course in the world. And I think we did that. So, you know, started discussing it a long time ago. And so this is it. I will be with you every step of the way. You won't just get an instructor, but you'll get a mentor and a friend. I'm looking forward to meeting everybody in the course.
Going to be
Thanks so
exciting
much.
and dynamic.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Look forward to starting this next week with all of you. Have a great day.
Take care,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.